And now some political analysis. Jamelle Bouie is the chief political correspondent at Slate and a CBS News political analyst. Michael Gerson is a columnist at the Washington Post. We'd like to welcome to the program Zeke Miller. He's a White House reporter for the Associated Press. And Anne Gearan is a White House correspondent for the Washington Post. Lots, as always, to talk about in the week that was. But Zeke, we saw some news this morning out of the White House. The president had dismissed his legal counsel, John Dowd, earlier in the week. He said he was going to replace him, but now we're learning the president can't hire the person he wanted. What's going on? Well,
we're finding out that the Trump legal team looks a little like the Trump White House to a certain extent, where they're just not getting the I's dotted and the T's crossed, where here the Trump legal team is saying that because his new attorneys had represented others in that in the Russia investigation, that they are conflicted out from working for the president, and that is, that's one of those things that they probably should have worked out before they got rid of John Dowd.
So what happened? How did John Dowd get fired before there was actually a new lawyer to replace him?
Well, it's really not entirely clear. Like everything else around the Trump legal team, it is kind of a little slapdash to a certain extent, where they're not actually doing all the legwork, and also it's the challenge of working for President Trump, where he does make some of those decisions somewhat impulsively, and that doesn't always lead to sort of all the follow through and all the background that needs to get, the legwork that needs to get all those things in place.
And we saw another shakeup at the White House this week. H.R. McMaster, who has been rumored to be departing the White House for some time, actually is now resigning. He's being replaced by John Bolton. What does that signal about what's ahead for foreign policy?
Well, I think it signals buckle up. John Bolton is a very, very skilled tactician. He has been around Washington for decades. He has held some of the most extreme views now represented in the White House in administrations past and in between those administrations. And he has been consistent. I do not expect him to change those views at all. He is an interventionist in the classic sense. He was the original neoconservative.
But the president campaigned saying he didn't support those ideas.
Right. The president has said that the Iraq War was one of the biggest blunders of American history, not just foreign policy, history, period. John Bolton was and remains a resolute supporter of the Iraq War. I think it very much remains to be seen how they mesh on policy. Trump appears to like Bolton for his pithy, forthright opinions, often expressed on Fox News, but also just that he's a guy who Trump recognizes. He is very opinionated and very firm in those opinions. And one of the things he didn't like about McMaster is that he thought that McMaster was too cerebral and caveated everything on this hand and that hand. He didn't like that.
I think one thing that's worth noting about President Trump is that during the campaign, he did campaign against the Iraq War, but that wasn't necessarily sort of a dovish position. President Trump, throughout the campaign in 2016, said that what the United States military should have done is taken the oil. Mm-hmm. It should have been much more aggressive. It should have essentially acted as an almost imperial power in Iraq. And I think there's a degree to which the Bolton choice reflects this aggressive-ness within Trump's political message, even that was there at the same time that Trump was skeptical of the Iraq War.
I agree with that. I mean, he is not a neoconservative. He does not believe in the promotion of democracy.
The president is
not. No, Bolton is not. He is much more in the category of Dick Cheney, a hard power realist, an interventionist, exactly right, but not with an idealistic bent. So I think it does kind of fit the president in a certain way. But I think sometimes we read a little bit too much into these too, because I'm not sure that this represents some kind of change in policy. I think it's just equally plausible that the president likes people who play loyalists on television. And that's exactly what he was, and I think that's what attracted the president to him, not his views on foreign policy.
It's interesting you say you don't necessarily view him as ideological in this sense, because there has been this narrative that the president's surrounding himself with people who are more ideological on some of these issues. Certainly on Iran, Bolton has been on the record that he wants to fully pull out of this nuclear deal. He's been on the record urging some military intervention in North Korea as well.
I think he's deferring to people who defer to him, who are not disagreeing with him. I mean, he's punished people that confront him, that bring a different perspective. I don't think it's that Larry Kudlow is a Kempite. That's not the reason that he's there. He's a supply sider. The president is not. He doesn't have any views on that topic, as far as I can tell. But he's a loyalist. And I think he's selected out people who have strong views that disagree with him.
Well, we saw that even just all the factions early on in the administration, whether it be the Jared Kushner wing, which has been weakened, the Reince Priebus wing of the Republican establishment that's also been weakened, and the Steve Bannon wing of nationalists that have been largely exiled out of this administration. What's been replaced that team of rivals is kind of this squad of cheerleaders of people who have that personal relationship with the president. That's what he values more than anything else. And I think that's exactly the right way to view both the Kudlow hire and then also this film with Bolton.
I think we shouldn't understate, though, that Kudlow, Bolton, they're television personalities as much as they're pundits or operators. And I think there is something to the fact that the president, who does watch a tremendous amount of Fox News, who every morning tweets, live tweets his Fox News viewing.
He says he doesn't watch television.
He doesn't
very
watch
often.
television at all. He's never seen a lick of it. But there has to be a degree to which this does just reflect the president's comfort with these television personalities, that he likes what they say on TV, and so he wants them in his White House.
Well, fitting that idea is Larry Kudlow, who's on his economic team now, replacing Gary Cohn, rejects the idea of tariffs, and the president doubled down this week on the tariffs, not just on steel and aluminum, but putting them on China. How do you make sense of that, Michael? I mean, did this start a trade war?
I don't think you do make logical sense of it. I mean, this is president. He's not just surrounded by chaos. The chaos is internal. He doesn't have consistent views on a number of things. Tariffs may be actually an exception. This is one issue that he has talked about for quite a while. But it certainly doesn't influence his personnel choices in this case. So I think we do overinterpret these things.
And do you think that putting these tariffs on China, even though they're not detailed yet, complicates the rest of the diplomacy with North Korea because we need China's help?
For sure. I mean, this is something that Trump talked about, a version of this on the campaign, and people expected to see early on in the administration. The fact that he didn't move on it quickly was seen as, oh, he's actually serious about trying to do something about North Korea. And then they did it. They spent a year applying very strict sanctions with China's cooperation and help at the United Nations. And Trump would occasionally, smack Xi Jinping around a little bit, saying, oh, he's not doing enough. But then almost in the same breath, he would say, but he's a good guy, he's trying to do something. And Trump really does appear to understand that a key to any solution with North Korea, it goes through China. And so why he's doing this now is a mystery to me, and it absolutely complicates things. We have not heard China say at this point that they will no longer cooperate or really make any definitive statements about North Korea at all, but clearly it's a card they now have to play.
Zeke, what happened on Friday? The president came out and tweeted he was going to veto this $1.3 trillion spending package that he had been persuaded and the White House had said he was going to sign off on, and then 4 hours later, he changes his mind again.
Well, he'd been pretty clear that he did not like this legislation. Paul Ryan had to go over to the White House and sort of convince him earlier in the week to sort of get behind it, but he was watching television news. It all comes back to he was watching Fox News get the criticism from traditional conservatives over big spending legislation. This was big spending legislation that Republicans ran against and talked a lot about, and certainly in the Obama years. And that this is one the president was going to have to sit down and sign. So it was the $1.3 trillion price tag. Was also some of the other little sweeteners that Democrats got as an inducement to get their votes. All of those things got the president kind of riled up that morning. And it's not clear what he even thought he was going to get. It wasn't a negotiating position. Congress was out of town, but it was a little bit of venting of frustration.
It was striking to watch that venting happen on Twitter, because it's this remarkable statement of presidential weakness. This is a Republican president with a Republican Congress, and this is a Republican-crafted spending bill fundamentally. And the president has gone on his main platform to say, I hate this bill, I'm not going to let it happen again, which raises the question, how did it happen in the first place? And I think that reflects the extent to which President Trump is not a particularly engaged president with Congress, does not have the kind of strength of relationships that would get him to work his will through Congress. And I'm just kind of shocked that he would express this and like let the world know that this is the case. But I suppose that is how President Trump does things.
He imagines himself a great negotiator, but this is a loser's bluff. This is something that, not a good negotiating approach.
To say you're going to do something and then not do it.
Right, exactly. And he wants high stakes negotiations with the North Koreans, with the Chinese on tariffs. But it's really kind of a self-confidence without accomplishment. I don't see him as particularly good in negotiations, particularly with the Congress, but in other areas. So I think that he imagines himself the great negotiator, but I'm not sure that the reality shows it.
Michael, I want to ask you about another TV moment yet to come on 60 Minutes on this network tonight. Stormy Daniels is going to tell her story. This week, we also heard from a Playboy playmate who claims to have had this past affair with Donald Trump before he was president. Are these stories credible, and do they matter?
Well, it's actually an extraordinary cultural moment that a porn star is more credible than the President of the United States when it comes to these matters. And I don't think it's even close. I would take her word over his on any of these matters. This is a case where the President has been caught in a certain approach, which is he plays it close to the line, he violates rules, he does unethical things, and then he buys the silence of others. He buys legal threats. He encourages non-disclosure agreements, trying to cover what he does. And she has called him on this. And I think it's an amazing cultural moment.
A cultural moment. Does it have a political cost?
I think it does. One thing that's striking about the Stormy Daniels controversy, scandal.
I know, we don't even know what to call it, really.
Daniels Gate? I don't know. Is that she's been able to keep it in the news. Like, unlike so
that's
much.
part of the legal strategy, it would appear.
Right. Unlike so much of the controversy around President Trump, she and her lawyers have been able to make this a continuing story. And that, for me, is why I think this might actually have some political consequence for him down the road, because it is putting him in a bind. It's putting him and his team in a bind. They have to do something to address it without kind of confirming it. And that is something, that's a line they haven't been able to.
And he's been silent on this, which is extraordinary.
Very quickly, Anne, are we going to see the White House expel Russian diplomats as they're indicating?
It's certainly something that the White House is considering, and Trump appears to be ready to go along with it. As we've discussed here, he changes his mind a lot. But a minimum of 20 is what's on the table, according to people I've talked to in the last couple of days. And this would be in solidarity with Britain.
We'll watch and see. Thank you very much to all of you. We'll be back in a moment.